I woke up to the smell of coffee, rich, dark, and oddly comforting on a Saturday morning. For a split second, I thought nothing of it. Then I heard laughter, too familiar to belong to my daughters clattering down the hallway. My heart lurched. Why would anyone be downstairs this early on a weekend? We liked our lazy Saturdays in pajamas until noon, cartoons and pancakes in front of the TV. I swung my legs out of bed, toes brushing the soft rug, and padded toward the stairs. The house was too quiet, the laughter too low. As I descended, I felt a flutter of dread. I reached the bottom step and froze in the foyer. There, in our kitchen, my kitchen stood Peter, shirt untucked, sleeves rolled up, leaning against the counter as if he lived there. And next to him, combing her hair with a gold hairbrush, was a woman I barely knew, caramel skin, long curly hair that shimmered under the recessed lights, dressed in one of my silky bathrobes. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. They both looked up, startled, as if they'd been caught mid-performance. The coffee table was spread with croissants, plates of fruit, 2 steaming mugs. Everything was arranged with a kind of lazy intimacy that made bile rise in my throat. Our family home, the one I thought only sheltered the people I loved, had become their weekend retreat. "Good morning," I said, voice tight, my professional tone slipping through the shock. "I see you've made yourselves comfortable." Peter flushed. "Honey, I don't honey me," I interrupted, voice cracking with something like steel. The mistress, her name was Simone, I'd learned, looked appalled, dropping the brush. She smoothed a curl behind her ear and opened her mouth, then shut it again. I walked toward them, skirts swishing over hardwood floors I'd spent weekends polishing. "Simone," I said, too loudly, "nice to meet you again." She looked at me, eyes wide. We'd exchanged pleasantries once at a holiday party. She'd been introduced as Olivia's friend from preschool. I'd never guessed then what role she'd play in my life. "Thank you for using our home," I added. "Breakfast looks exquisite." She straightened, clutching the coffee mug. "I'm sorry, I thought, you thought this belonged to you?" I forced a laugh that sounded hollow in the big kitchen. "Let me give you a tour." I waved a hand toward the counter. "These are our dishes, feel free to keep them, since you seem so attached. Those are our coffee mugs in case you thought they were rental property." My words were slow, deliberate. Peter winced. Simone's cheeks burned bright red. I crossed my arms. "Welcome to my eviction notice." She gasped. "Eviction?" Her voice was small, even though her body was draped in the luxury of my husband's betrayal. "Let me be clear." I took a step closer, voice steady. "This is my house, my daughter's house, my sanctuary. I did not wake up this morning, hoping to discover you sitting at my breakfast table. So I'm going to ask you kindly to pack your things and leave." I tapped the counter. "See those cabinets? They're locked. You won't find a single belonging of yours here, only mine and theirs." I nodded toward the living room, where my teenagers still slept, oblivious to the storm. "The clothes in your bag, the toothbrush in the bathroom, those belong to you. Gather them and go, now." Peter's lips trembled. "Sarah, please." "Call me Sarah," I said, softening momentarily. "But right now, call someone to pick you up, because I intend to change the locks immediately." I whipped out my phone and dialed our building superintendent. Simone sank to the chair, burying her face in her hands. Peter moved to comfort her, and I advanced, tone icier. "Don't, that seat will be gone too, by the time you leave." He flinched. "I'll wait by the door. You have 5 minutes. After that, the locksmith comes." He opened his mouth, eyes pleading, but I cut him off. It wasn't hate that fueled me in that moment. It was righteous fury. A person who betrays trust and safety in the home forfeits their claim to comfort. The house belonged to my children and me, not to spare bedrooms of deceit. While Simone sobbed silently into her morning coffee, I withdrew my keys and locked the front door behind me. Peter's face twisted as he rose to follow, hand outstretched as if to plead. I let it drop impotently at his side and walked out onto the porch, keeping my back to them. I dialed the superintendent. "Hello, Frank? It's me. Yes, Sarah. We need the locks changed. Entire set. The front door, back door, any spare. ASAP. I'll meet you with the new keys in 20 minutes. "Thank you." I hung up and inhaled the crisp air, rare, precious, untamed by simulation. I resisted the urge to look back. This was the moment I reclaimed my boundaries, my dignity. The next half hour passed in a blur of preparation, finding extra boxes in the garage, A bag for Simone's things perched at the front door, a small vase I removed from the counter. Petty, maybe, but I wanted no trace of her lipstick on our surfaces. I stepped inside. Peter and Simone stood by the door, gathering her purse, her scarf. Her shoulders shook. I pointed at the boxes. Over there, my heart pounded, but I didn't waver. I'd opened that door to freedom, slammed it on betrayal. I watched her place her high-heeled shoes on the hardwood, one by one. She picked up the gold brush from the counter, turned without looking at me, and pressed it into her bag. Peter finally found his voice. "Sarah, can we please talk?" "I can explain." I had let him keep the front door for a moment too long. I'd given him a final chance to speak reason, but that door slammed on excuses. "No more words," I said evenly. "You have your phone. Call anybody you want, but there's no argument left here." Simone rose, clutching her bag. She avoided my eyes as she retreated across the living room, heading for the side entrance I'd propped open earlier. Peter followed her, hands in his pockets, raw with guilt and embarrassment. They hesitated at the threshold. Then she glanced back once, tears shining bright. I faced her gaze, raising a single eyebrow. She looked away, and they slipped out. I heard the car start in the driveway, Peter's SUV, and tires crunch on the gravel. The morning birds returned, oblivious to human dramas. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, once, twice, 3 times. The click of each lock was a victory, a stitch in the tear of my heart. I dropped the keys in a bowl by the door. Inside the kitchen, the mess lingered, half-eaten croissants, a cup of cold coffee. I'd never forgive her for sitting at my breakfast table, for the intimacy of food and morning light, shared as if she belonged. But I could forgive the mess. I grabbed a sponge and dish soap and set about reclaiming my surfaces. I cried into the sink's suds, silent tears of anger, betrayal, grief. By the time the sun topped the rooftops, I'd scrubbed the counter until my hands pruned, thrown out the breakfast remnants, and wiped the windows until they gleamed. My reflection in the glass was raw, red-rimmed eyes, knuckles still white from the lock, turning. But I straightened my shoulders, ran water over my face, and exhaled. My daughters tumbled down the stairs, minutes later, bright, laughing, all unspoiled trust, and I embraced them fiercely, tighter than before. They smelled like pajamas and candy. They were my world, and I had protected it. We sat at the breakfast nook under new light, no more betrayal in the air, only the promise of pancakes and fresh beginnings. The morning was ours again, and in the gentle hum of the refrigerator, I heard something like hope. Tomorrow I would call a locksmith to rekey the security system. Tomorrow I would call my neighbor to borrow her car for errands. But today I had evicted the intruders and reclaimed my home, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. That morning's shock gave way to a blur of calls, texts, and weepy apologies, but I refused to let the adrenaline fade before I'd secured my little girl's sense of security. After locking Simone and Peter out, I packed away breakfast, scrubbed away the last trace of betrayal, and texted my parents. "I've changed the locks, you can pick up your spare keys tomorrow. Please don't send anyone else over." When the house fell truly silent again, I sank into the long banquette by the window, 2 mugs of hot chocolate, warming my hands. The girls, now dressed in sparkly tutus and brushing each other's hair, skipped down the hallway into the kitchen. "Mama, can we make pancakes?" Emma asked, eyes bright. I managed a smile. "Only if you promise to hold hands the whole time." They shrieked in unison, clasped arms, and spun in circles. Their joy was effortless, a promise that life goes on. I took a steadying breath and nodded. Pancakes it is. By lunchtime, I'd managed to keep the tantrums and questions at bay. Emma demanding syrup rivers, Lucy requiring precise butter rosettes, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe. A frantic knock at the door jolted me upright. I peered through the peephole. Our next door neighbor, Mrs. Chen, her silver bun askew, frantic eyes behind her glasses. I opened the door. "Mrs. Chen, are you okay?" She clutched her pearls. I heard screaming, his car accelerating. Then the front door slammed. "Are you all right in there?" I took her hand. "I'm fine. It's over now." "Thank you." She nodded, peering past me at the girls. "Is Peter gone?" "He is," I said gently. "I had to ask him to leave." Her face paled. "Your poor girls. You're home." She touched my arm. If there's anything I can do, I shook my head. Thank you. I'm okay. I closed the door, heart racing. Word would spread. I would face questions. Friends, church ladies, distant relatives. I would have to explain why our home, our sanctuary, had become a stage for adultery. But for now, I stared at my daughters, butter smudged and giggling. More syrup? I asked, voice catching. They nodded. That afternoon, I spent an hour changing the locks. Deadbolt, chain, smart lock with a new code. Each click of metal felt like a boundary re-established. I set up the surveillance cameras we'd discussed installing months ago. One by the front door, one in the back hallway. I programmed notifications to my phone. I snapped on my gloves, wiped my hands clean, and surveyed the empty entryway like a general inspecting newly fortified walls. Then I sent a simple group text to my closest circle, my sister, my best friend, and my women's small group leader. Team Sarah here. I had to evict Peter and his girlfriend this morning. The house is safe now. Please, no calls or visits until Sunday. I need quiet. Replies pinged in immediately. I'm so sorry. We're here when you're ready. Meal train starts today. Sign up link. And my phone buzzed with an email from the builder offering locksmith discounts. The barricades were up. My fortress was operational. That evening, I collapsed onto the sofa just as the girls were batting kisses and toddling off to bed. My body ached, and my mind spun with half-formed plans. Therapy for the girls, mediation papers for the divorce, weekend yard, work therapy with Mrs. Chen. I curled under a wool throw and texted my sister, "Can you pick up Olivia from ballet tomorrow? I'm meeting with a lawyer. Thank you." I stared into the flickering TV light. For the first time in months, I felt something like clarity. This was not my failure. This was Peter's, 50%. And there was no redemption left for two-timed betrayal in my sanctuary. The next morning, under a bright sky, I opened my laptop and scanned divorce attorneys. I drafted an email to my parents. Mom, Dad, I've spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. Please contact me before visiting. I love you. No immediate reply, just the heavy quiet of morning. I clicked send and felt my chest lighten by ounces. Then came a ping, an automated thank you from the family group chat. No, are you okay? Or what happened? Nothing. My heart throbbed with another truth. My parents would rather ignore the problem than choose sides. I banished that thought and turned to urgent tasks, securing childcare for upcoming Thursday's mediation, forwarding the nanny's resume to my lawyer, confirming next week's parent-teacher conference and the PTO's charity car wash. I would not let my girls' everyday lives falter. By midday, I'd settled them at their grandparents' house, Mom's after shaky assurances, Dad's stoic hugs, and headed to the lawyer's office in my neighbor's Corolla. The divorce process began with standard forms, custody preferences, division of assets. I asked for primary physical custody and equitable property split. The lawyer held up a copy of my judo medal collection, my wedding ring included. "We'll request those back," she said. I exhaled. My ring, the lock of hair in our wedding album, the echo of our vows, all of it laid out on paper, irretrievably broken. It felt at once necessary and grotesque. But midway through the consultation, my phone vibrated with a text from Peter. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Then a second from Simone. "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes and deleted both without reading. That evening, back home alone in my reclaimed domain, I walked through each room, touching the walls, testing the locks, smelling the emptiness. I carried a candle into the living room, the lotus scented that Peter had bought on our anniversary, and lit it. The flame danced against the window. I sat cross-legged in front of it and closed my eyes. I pictured the moment I evicted him, the flick of the keys, the locked door, the stunned faces. I felt the righteousness, my daughter's safety, my dignity restored. But beneath it was an ache, loss of a shared life, family dinners, future anniversaries. That loss still stung. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I reclaimed my home. Tomorrow I reclaim my heart." I pressed the pen and let tears fall across the page. For the first time since dawn, I allowed myself to grieve. Over the next week, I fell into a new rhythm. I swapped my bridal jewelry for simple studs. I held long coffee dates with friends who brought casseroles. I recorded voicemail greetings. "This is Sarah. Please leave a message. I'll return calls later." I fielded questions from concerned coworkers. Everything okay at home? I managed a smile, sorting some personal things. Thank you for your support. The girls came home each night under sloping twilight. We ate spaghetti on mismatched plates and danced to Disney tunes in the living room. I reinstated family movie night with locked doors and a rule no grown-up drama allowed. They giggled as Tangled played. I watched their radiant faces, feeling the house fill with warmth again. Meanwhile, Peter's lawyer delivered divorce papers at the house. No knock, just a black envelope slipped under the door. I picked it up, folded it, and placed it in my desk. Tomorrow's chore. Peter's absence already created a hollow hush in the morning air. Some morning, I'd repurpose his side of the closet for my coats. Then came Sunday afternoon, a knock at the door. I glanced through the peephole. It was Simone, not Peter, just her. I hesitated, hand on the lock. She stood on the porch, pale, clutching a box of cupcakes. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice small. "I saved you a chocolate orange one, your favorite." My breath caught. I wanted to slam the door, chew her apology out of her mouth. But I unbolted one latch, then another. I opened the door just enough for my head to slip through. She held out the box. I took it, dumbfounded. "Why are you here?" My arms crossed already. She swallowed. "I know I shouldn't. He promised he would leave you alone. But you were right to evict us. I deserve all the hate and more. But I just wanted..." She wiped her cheek. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. To you and to them." She jerked a thumb past my shoulder. "To your daughters." My chest tightened. I felt anger, but also curiosity. She was the mistress, the intruder. She had no right. And yet, get that out of sight of the girls. I snapped, but I stepped aside to let her in. "But don't call them today." She set the box on the counter, sweet aromas filling the kitchen. Of course, she stayed on the edge of the room, silent apology in her stance. While she lingered, I felt the moment shift. Betrayal, eviction, grief, and now forgiveness. Somewhere between anger and grace, I saw a path forward, not as a couple, but as a woman healing her home. I locked the door behind her again. The sound was final. I turned the cupcakes. One by one, I arranged them on a plate and set them aside, a peace offering not for her but for me to acknowledge my hurt and my power to rise above it. I texted my sister, "Cupcake therapy. Can you pick the girls up tomorrow for a sleepover? Need a break." And as I headed to my bedroom to journal, I heard that lotus candle flicker. The flame was small, fragile, yet it glowed bright enough to light the darkness. Tomorrow I'd face the next storm: paperwork, divorce court, family gatherings. But in this moment, I tasted hope, the sweetness of forgiveness mixed with the strength of boundaries. And I knew I would stand firm, milking this victory for every ounce of my renewed freedom. Because in the end, love is not just about who stays, it's about choosing who deserves a place at your table. And I was ready to pick the guests myself.